Welcome to the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. We're going to be looking at discovery and action dialogue.
Okay.
Or DADAD.
Yeah.
And it's a really cool approach to problem solving.
Right.
That suggests that solutions are often hiding in plain sight.
Yes.
Within the group facing the challenge.
Absolutely.
And so today you've provided us with some material from the Liberating Structures website, which focuses on innovative ways of working together.
Yeah.
And
it's a great website.
Yeah.
Really good stuff there.
So it mentions this idea of positive deviance. What exactly does that mean in this context?
Well, think of it this way. Within any group facing a challenge, there are often individuals who, despite the same obstacles, consistently achieve better results.
Yeah.
These are our positive deviants.
Go.
They hold the key to unlocking solutions because they're already doing something different, something that works.
So it's not about bringing in some hotshot consultant or imposing top-down solutions.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing the expertise that already exists within the group.
Yes.
I like that.
Absolutely. The source uses a really compelling example of a hospital trying to reduce hospital-acquired infections.
Okay.
Instead of just implementing new protocols, they used D-Day to identify nurses who consistently had lower infection rates in their patients.
Interesting.
By understanding what those nurses were doing differently, maybe a specific hand-washing technique or a way of prepping the room, they were able to uncover practices that could be shared and adopted by others.
So those nurses are the positive deviants in this scenario.
Exactly.
And instead of reinventing the wheel, they're leveraging the knowledge and experience of those who are already succeeding. It's like crowdsourcing solutions from within, but in a very targeted and insightful way.
Precisely. Now, the magic of DAD lies in its structure.
Okay.
A series of 7 questions designed to guide the group towards discovering these hidden solutions.
Okay, so these 7 questions are the heart of DA. Let's walk through them and see how they work their magic. What's the first one?
The first question is all about establishing a common understanding of the problem.
Okay.
How do you know when problem X is present? It's about getting everyone on the same page. And hearing different perspectives on how the problem manifests itself.
So right off the bat, you're ensuring everyone has a voice in defining the problem.
Yes.
Which is crucial for buy-in later on.
Great. Then the second question gets a bit more personal.
Okay.
How do you contribute effectively to solving problem X? This encourages people to reflect on their own actions and contributions, both positive and negative.
Yeah.
This is where those positive deviant behaviors might start to surface.
Can you give an example of how that might play out in a real setting?
Sure.
Let's stick with a hospital scenario.
Imagine a nurse responding to this question by saying, I always make sure to double-check the medication dosage, even if it means delaying things slightly.
Okay.
I've seen too many close calls because of dosage errors. Right. That might not be a formal protocol, but it's a personal practice that contributes to patient safety.
I see. And by sharing that practice, it opens up the possibility for others to adopt it as well.
Exactly. And that's how you start to shift from individual behaviors to collective solutions.
Okay.
Now, the third question delves into those barriers that prevent people from consistently implementing these effective practices. What prevents you from doing this or taking these actions all the time?
So you're getting at the root causes of the problem, not just the symptoms.
Right. Maybe the nurse in our example would say, sometimes there's just not enough staff on hand and I feel pressured to rush things.
So by identifying those obstacles, you can start to think about ways to address them and make it easier for people to do what they know works best.
Exactly. This is where DAD starts to move beyond simply identifying what works to understanding why it doesn't always work and what needs to change.
I see. So we've laid the groundwork with the first 3 questions. Understanding the problem, the current actions, and the barriers.
Yes.
What's next?
This is where we get to the real heart of D-Day.
Okay.
Identifying those positive deviants. The fourth question asks, do you know anybody who is able to frequently solve problem X and overcome barriers? What behaviors or practices made their success possible? Now we're explicitly searching for those hidden gems of wisdom within the group.
So now we're not just talking about individual actions. We're actually looking for people who are consistently achieving better outcomes, even in the face of the same challenges.
Exactly. It's about shining a spotlight on those individuals and understanding what sets them apart.
Okay. Let's say in our hospital example, someone points to a specific nurse and says, she always seems to have the lowest infection rates on her ward. How does she do it?
Yeah.
What happens next?
The group would then explore what that nurse does differently.
Hmm.
Maybe she's meticulous about prepping equipment, or perhaps she has a unique way of communicating with patients that encourages compliance with hygiene protocols. Whatever it is, by studying her practices, they're uncovering ready-made solutions that are proven to work in their specific context.
It's like finding a hidden treasure map to success.
Hmm.
But the map was actually drawn by someone who's already been there and knows the way.
That's a great analogy. And once you've identified these positive deviants and understood their approaches, the next step is to open up the floor for even more ideas and innovation. This is where question 5 comes in.
Okay.
Do you have any other ideas?
So you're not just limited to replicating what the positive deviants are doing. You're encouraging the group to build on those insights and come up with their own creative solutions.
That's right. You're leveraging the collective wisdom of the entire group, not just a select few.
Yeah.
Then question 6 gets down to the nitty-gritty of action planning.
Okay.
What needs to be done to make it happen? Any volunteers?
This is where the rubber meets the road, right?
Yes.
It's about translating ideas into concrete steps and taking ownership of implementation. I imagine this also helps to avoid that common problem of great ideas getting stuck in meeting rooms.
Absolutely. When people volunteer to take charge of specific actions, it creates a sense of accountability and commitment. And finally, question 7 ensures that those solutions have the necessary support to succeed.
Okay.
Who else needs to be involved?
So you're expanding the circle of engagement and ensuring that all relevant stakeholders are on board.
Yeah.
As we're going through these 7 questions, I'm struck by how simple and accessible this structure is. It's something that any team or organization could use regardless of their size or resources.
You're absolutely right. And that's one of the things that makes DAD so powerful.
Yeah.
It doesn't require fancy tools or expensive consultants. It's all about asking the right questions and creating a space for dialogue and discovery.
Now, the source material you provided highlights some key benefits of using DAD. It mentions things like frontline ownership of solutions, inspiration over compulsion, and local solutions for local problems.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on why those aspects are so crucial for effective problem solving?
Of course. Let's start with frontline ownership. When solutions are discovered and championed by the people who are actually doing the work, they're far more likely to be embraced and implemented effectively.
Okay.
People are more invested in solutions they've helped create.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
If I feel like I've had a voice in shaping the solution, I'm going to be much more motivated to see it succeed.
Exactly.
It's not some top-down mandate that feels disconnected from my reality.
Exactly. And that ties into the idea of inspiration over compulsion. DID doesn't rely on force or pressure to drive change. Instead, it creates an environment where people are inspired to act based on their own insights and discoveries. They want to make things better because they've seen the potential for improvement firsthand.
It's like that saying, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime.
Yes.
DAD is about teaching people to find their own solutions, not just handing them down from on high.
Precisely. And the third daddy recognizes that cookie-cutter solutions rarely work.
Yeah.
It emphasizes local solutions for local problems. By empowering people to find solutions that fit their specific circumstances, you're much more likely to create lasting change. What works in one hospital, for example, might not work in another, even if they're facing a similar challenge.
So DAD is really about tailoring solutions to the unique context of the problem, which is often missing in those one-size-fits-all approaches. Now, if you're listening to this and thinking, okay, this DAD thing sounds pretty interesting, but when would I actually use it? What kind of situations is it best suited for?
Well, DAD is especially effective when you're dealing with a stubborn problem where traditional approaches haven't been successful. It's like hitting the reset button and saying, okay, let's go back to the drawing board, but this time let's tap into the collective wisdom of the people who are closest to the problem.
So it's not about giving up.
No.
It's about approaching the problem from a fresh perspective and leveraging the insights of those who are living with it every day. What else?
DAD is also really helpful when you want to unleash the collective wisdom of your team, but you're not sure how to go about it. It provides a clear and structured process for doing just that. You don't have to invent your own facilitation method or come up with some elaborate brainstorming technique. DAD gives you the framework.
It takes the guesswork out of it, which could be really valuable for teams that are new to this kind of collaborative problem solving. And finally, DAD is a great fit when you're looking for solutions that are truly sustainable and driven by the people who are doing the work.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, it's not just about finding a solution. It's about creating a culture of continuous improvement where people feel empowered to identify and solve problems on their own. That's how you create lasting change.
So DAD is as much about mindset as it is about methodology. It's about shifting from a culture of dependence to a culture of ownership. Now, the source material you provided also delves into some of the tips and traps of facilitating a dad session. This is where things get a little counterintuitive, which I always find fascinating.
Right. There are a few things that go against our usual instincts about how to facilitate a brainstorming or problem-solving session. One of the most surprising pieces of advice is don't give or take assignments.
Wait, what? You mean even though you're facilitating the process, you're not dictating who does what?
Exactly. The idea is to let solutions emerge organically from the group's own discoveries and conversations. You're creating the space for self-organization and letting the solutions bubble up from within. Remember, DI is about tapping into the collective wisdom of the group. If you start assigning tasks or directing people too much, you risk stifling that creative energy.
So you're saying instead of imposing a structure, you're creating the conditions for the group to find its own way. That's pretty radical.
It can feel that way, especially if you're used to more traditional top-down approaches to problem solving. And it leads us to another counterintuitive tip.
Okay.
Avoid praising ideas.
Hold on. Isn't positive reinforcement a good thing? Wouldn't withholding praise stifle creativity?
That's a great question, and it goes against our instinct to be encouraging and supportive. But think about it. If you're constantly saying things like, that's a great idea, or I love that, you're actually influencing the group's evaluation of their own ideas.
Ah, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
You're creating a more objective evaluation process by maintaining neutrality. It allows the group to assess their own ideas based on their merits, not on whether they'll please the facilitator.
Precisely. You're encouraging critical thinking and self-reflection, not external validation. And the source material emphasizes another important point for facilitators.
Okay.
Humility. It says, study at the feet of the people doing the work.
So you're not coming in as the expert with all the answers. You're coming in as a guide, a facilitator who's there to help the group unlock their own wisdom.
Exactly. The facilitator's role in DID is to create the space for dialogue, ask the right questions, and then step back and let the group's expertise lead the way. The real magic happens when the facilitator trusts the process and the people in the room.
It sounds like DAD is as much about shifting mindsets as it is about finding solutions. Yeah. It's about empowering people to take ownership of the challenges they face and find their own solutions.
That's a great way to put it. And speaking of expanding possibilities, the source material also touches on some interesting variations of DAD.
Okay.
For instance, it mentions combining DAD with TRIZ-like questions.
Okay, refresh my memory. What's TRIZ again?
TRIZ is a problem-solving methodology that uses inventive principles to overcome technical contradictions. So instead of just identifying barriers in a DAD session, you might ask questions that challenge assumptions and push the boundaries of what's possible.
Interesting. So you're combining the structured dialogue of DAD with a more provocative, inventive approach.
That's right. The source material also mentions combining DAD with improv prototyping, which is a way of bringing solutions to life through role-playing and simulations.
I love that idea. So you're not just brainstorming solutions in the abstract. You're actually getting up and acting them out, seeing how they might play out in a real-world scenario. That sounds like a lot of fun.
It can be very engaging and insightful. And it's another example of how DAD can be adapted to fit different contexts and needs. The material even suggests using the DAD question structure in one-on-one conversations.
So it's not just limited to group settings. You could use those 7 questions to unlock insights and solutions in any interaction.
Exactly. The core principles of DAD are applicable in a surprisingly wide range of situations.
So what stands out to you as the most compelling aspect of DAD? What's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from this deep dive?
For me, it's the emphasis on positive deviance. It's a reminder that we often focus on what's not working instead of looking for what is working, even in small pockets. That shift in perspective can be incredibly powerful.
It's like choosing to focus on the light instead of the darkness. You're seeking out those glimmers of hope and success that can illuminate the path forward. And by studying those who are already succeeding, we can learn valuable lessons that can be applied more broadly.
Absolutely. And remember, DID is not a one-time fix. It's an ongoing process of discovery and adaptation. It's about creating a culture of continuous improvement where everyone feels empowered to contribute.
Well, there you have it, a deep dive into discovery and action dialogue. Hopefully this has given you a new perspective on problem solving and inspired you to explore this approach in your own work and life. Remember, the solutions are often closer than you think.
That's right. The key is to ask the right questions, listen carefully, and trust the collective wisdom of the group.
And if you want to dive deeper into DID, the source material mentions numerous real-world examples and variations. Those could be a great place to start.
Happy exploring.
See you next time on the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Until next time.
See you then.